Process and background. At the last review of the 30 series closures, there were around 3.2 million of these joints in the D-side access network. This equates to a 50-50 split of the resin and heat shrink port type closures. Resin joints were introduced during the 1970s and superseded by the heat shrink port closure during the 80s and 90s. If correctly fitted at the point of installation, these joints will continue to yield effective service so long as they are entered enclosed to the correct quality standard, as set out in the ISIS documentation number displayed on the screen. As part of any provision, repair or FVR activity, you must assess the existing joint to find the most effective uplift method. Does the joint need to be removed or replaced, or can the joint be effectively sealed using Dexbond resin sealant? If not, choose the most effective remake method. Use the pull-through method as the first option. Resin joints should only be removed as a last resort because of the difficulty in removing and replacing them. These short videos highlight the methods required to remove legacy joints within the OpenReach network. The aim is to provide insight to both current and new engineers expected to replace these cable joints under provision, repair, or fault volume reduction activity. This video covers removal of 30 series heat shrink port type closures. Health and safety. Please note, the content shown in this video does not replace the mandatory training required to comply with BT's engineering policies, specifically around health and safety. It is intended as supplementary information or to serve as a reminder. BT's safety policy and mandatory training must be complied with and completed by all BT personnel and contractors. Some sequences in this video may have been shortened for ease of viewing. Removing a 30 series joint with heat shrink ports. Removing 30 series heat shrink cable closures is ideally completed using gas and heat to remove the cable ports. However, following a recent change in training, this video shows a best practice method which can be employed to allow the cold removal of cables from these joint enclosures. Please attempt to remake the joint to a quality standard using the Dexbond material that can be found in the OpenReach stores. Remove the dome and place a small bag over the cable pairs and tape the bag in place to protect the cable pairs whilst removing the joint. Using a combination of junior and large hacksaws, carefully cut the outer body of the closure, making a vertical cut in the centre of each cable port, being careful to cut lightly so you only cut through the heat shrink and cable port but not the cable sheath. Now make vertical cuts to each side of the port and then prise out this section. When the plastic is being cut, ensure that a dust mask is worn. Use a hammer where necessary to break the individual ports away from the base. Where the heat shrink tube and cable meet, carefully cut all the way around the base of the port to allow the cable to move freely within the port, providing it hasn't been Dexbonded within the joint. Repeat for each cable entering the base of the joint, making sure each cable is loosened. For oval ports where there are two cables together, repeat the process by firstly cutting in the centre of the port between the two cables. Use a hammer and chipping knife to separate the two cables, taking care not to damage them. Lightly cut around the port base, taking care not to damage the cable. Use a combination of the chipping knife and the junior hacksaw to carefully cut around the area where the port meets the cables. Pincers and cutters can be used to cut away the final sections of the heat shrink to allow the cables to separate. Pliers can be used to remove the heat shrink from the cable at this point. Use a junior hacksaw and a chipping knife to carefully remove the Dexbond resin from each cable. For single cable ports, gently tap the port to separate it from the heat shrink, which then allows the port to be removed from the cable. Repeat for each cable until all ports have been removed. You should now have all of the cable ports removed and the cables can be placed into the appropriate clip joint closure. If sufficient cable sheath exists, then the cable can be placed into the clip joint closure with the foil and heat shrink on the outside of the cable joint as shown. Where insufficient cable sheath exists, then the heat shrink and foil can be placed within the joint. If the heat shrink cannot be removed, a larger universal clip joint will be required to allow cable introduction into the joint, as shown in the following picture. The instructions for fitting the universal clipped joint can be found within the enclosure pack. Further guidance is available from the bookstall in ISIS documentation number displayed on the screen.